Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm New York State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, and I'm very pleased to be joined today by some of New York's leading advocates for a more fair, more effective, and more transparent government. Some of the people here I've worked with for a very long time on these issues, but I think we are at a unique moment in the state's history where more substantial reforms than we've ever passed before are possible. I'm proud to be joined today by the Nassau County District Attorney, Madeline Singas, by Assemblymember Todd Kaminsky, by Lisa Tyson, the leader of the Long Island Progressive Coalition, and by my warrior colleague in the fight for good government for a very long time, Susan Lerner of Common Cause. Thank you for being here with us today. We're also joined by some activists, including people from Make the Road New York, New York Communities for Change, the League of Women Voters, and of course the Long Island Progressive Coalition. Ladies and gentlemen, we know that corruption in New York State is nothing new. But even in our state's long history, the events of this year stand out. To be clear, I do not believe that corruption is worse now than it has ever been. But more of it is now being exposed by prosecutors and by journalists. I'm proud to say that the prosecutors now include much more activity by the Office of the New York State Attorney General than ever before in history. And while the overwhelming majority of our public servants are just seeking to do good for the people they represent, this year, with the leaders of both houses of the legislature indicted for corruption in a single session, the need for reform is shockingly clear. The governor and the new legislative leaders met on May 13th to discuss their priorities for the end of the legislative session. Amazingly, ethics reform and campaign finance reform did not even make the cut. They were not even on Albany's agenda. Well, on Wednesday, I announced that I was introducing legislation for more transformational reform of our campaign finance, ethics, and justice systems than ever before, because these reforms have to be put back on the agenda. For the people of the state of New York, these reforms are the agenda. Concern about corruption goes far beyond activists and good government groups. A new poll out this week shows that 90%, actually more than 90% of New Yorkers consider corruption to be a serious problem. Corruption, ladies and gentlemen, is a hidden tax. Every New Yorker understands that dollars diverted for private use, every deal with a corrupt crony imposes a tax on the hard-working men and women of the state of New York. And for years, each scandal has followed a familiar pattern. It brings a wave of outrage that is followed by prosecution, then reforms that really don't get to the roots of the problem and solve it, followed by another scandal and another round of reforms at the margin. Well, that's not good enough. It's not good enough for me. It's not good enough for the advocates and public servants standing here with me today, and it's damn sure not good enough for the people of the state of New York. That is why on Wednesday we introduced the End New York Corruption Now Act, a comprehensive ethics package that reformers, good government groups, activists, and the people demand. The reform legislation we introduced this week has three main goals. First, to end the pernicious effect of outside money in both politics and government. Second, to ensure that every act of corruption is met with a swift and serious response. And third, to encourage more honorable people to pursue public service. No one can say that the reforms proposed in this legislation are radical or partisan. Many of the proposals have been advanced and examined for years. Many of them have been introduced by members of both the Senate and the Assembly. In fact, many of the reforms have been passed in the State Assembly for years. And I'm pleased to say that since we made our announcement on Wednesday, in fact, the State Assembly has taken action, and Assemblyman Kaminsky will speak of that, but I'm proud to announce that our legislation has been introduced in the New York State Assembly, sponsored by Assembly members Joe Lenthal, the chair of the Codes Committee, Assembly member Daniel O'Donnell, chair of the Committee on Corrections, and our own Todd Kaminsky, and he will speak to that. So the point is simple. The legislature has all the time and the information they need to take action on this legislation and make all the changes proposed in this bill before the end of this year's session. This bill is more comprehensive, the reforms are more fundamental, but it addresses issues that we're familiar with, and the swift action by the Assembly shows that we can get this done, and I'm very pleased that the Assembly has responded so quickly to our proposal. Let me sum up what we're proposing. This legislation is going to end outside employment for lawmakers, ban per diem payments, dramatically tighten campaign contribution limits, and the rules for reimbursement. If you work for the people of New York, the people of New York should be your only clients. In turn, legislators must be paid like the full-time professionals that they are. I propose a substantial pay raise, which would be the first salary increase for the legislature since 1998. And let's extend legislative terms from 2 years to 4 years. This will give lawmakers time to focus on governing instead of politics. We will also, in this legislation, cut down on Albany's pay-to-play culture by dramatically lowering New York's campaign contribution limits, currently among the highest in the nation. And we will further limit contributions from lobbyists and companies that do business with the state, even beyond the regular limits we're imposing for other citizens. Quite a few states already do this. In fact, we have rules like this in New York City, and there's no reason that we can't do the same in Albany. Speaking of New York City, the city already has demonstrated that a voluntary public financing system can work. It enables more good, honest people of modest means to seek public office. Of course, even with these reforms, some public officials will break the law, which is why politicians who break the law must see swift and serious consequences. We can strengthen enforcement by giving the Office of the Attorney General the clear authority to investigate any type of public corruption. I'm proud of the fact that my office, working with the office of our great state controller, Tom DiNapoli, has prosecuted more than 70 corrupt officials and their cronies across the state in an unprecedented partnership between the Attorney General and the state controller. But the state's top law enforcement agency should have the right and responsibility to root out public corruption anywhere on its own. This legislation would also strengthen the hand of all state prosecutors. It would make it easier to prosecute bribery cases. It would put further restrictions on self-dealing. It has provisions to tighten up the system to ensure swift and serious responses to any act of public corruption. My friends, at the end of the day, there are only two paths forward: more scandals, more prosecutions, and the further erosion of public confidence, or real transformational reform that will prevent corruption in the first place. There have been reports, even since Wednesday, in the last 2 days, of further investigations involving political corruption in the state of New York. I'm not going to comment on any specific investigations, but it's getting to look like my trip to promote this bill could be called the "Have You Had Enough Yet" tour of the state of New York. We don't want more scandals and prosecutions. We don't want to continue down this path. But I urge all of my colleagues in government in Albany that the only alternative is transformational form at a level that has not been contemplated before, and no more tinkering around the margins. I'm very pleased that the folks here standing with me are here. Some of us have been fighting on these issues for decades. Some of us, well, I have gotten very gray in the process. But ladies and gentlemen, this year we are in a unique moment. The level of public outrage is at an all-time high, and we have the tried and tested proposals that have been shown to work in the city of New York and in other states around the country. The time for fundamental reform is here. We have to seize this moment. Average New Yorkers are demanding that we do so. I am done with halfway measures, and so are the people of the state of New York. bold change, real change, transformational change is possible, and I'm proud to be here with my colleagues and activists who are the ones who are carrying this message to the people of New York to say, this is the time to demand real action. This is the time to insist that the system get cleaned up once and for all. And now I'm very proud to be joined by someone who's been a terrific colleague, a great prosecutor before she was the district attorney, and since she's been the district attorney, Nassau County District Attorney Madeline Singas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General. In a 2013 speech, U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara spoke about the sad truth that a New York State senator is more likely to go to jail than to lose re-election. And that was 2013, before the Moreland Commission and before two of our top leaders in Albany were indicted, who join a long list of others accused and convicted of abusing their offices for personal gain. There is a crisis of confidence in our government, and Band-Aid fixes don't go far enough. It's unquestionable that comprehensive reform is needed, a complete overhaul to address the ills that for too long have allowed a few corrupt politicians to tarnish the reputation of everyone in public service. Attorney General Schneiderman is proposing the comprehensive reform and legislation we need. That is why I am proud to stand here with him in support of the End New York Corruption Now Act. The Attorney General's legislation addresses many of the ills that allow corrupt government officials to victimize the public, enrich themselves, and get away with it. By banning outside employment, strengthening bribery laws, and reforming a campaign finance system that invites abuse, this important legislation enhances New York state law to end the plague on our state government. And by giving prosecutors additional tools we need to prosecute corruption, this expansive legislation marks a critical step toward restoring New Yorkers' trust in the integrity of their government. I thank Attorney General Eric Schneiderman and his staff for proposing this legislation, and I encourage the legislature and the governor to take quick action to enact these critical reforms. Thank you.
Thank you, District Attorney. And now I'm very pleased to introduce Assemblymember Todd Kaminsky, who is a part of the rapid response of the State Assembly to our proposal. We only introduced this legislation on Wednesday, and the Assembly has moved to act quickly. We look for the other parts of the government in Albany to take similarly quick action. He is only a freshman, but he has already had a huge impact. As a reformer, I would note that I was a freshman senator as a reformer, and after one term as an active reformer, my district was redrawn into a 68% Latino district by people who knew I didn't speak Spanish, so welcome. But someone who has already made a big difference and is here to speak to the fact that it is certainly not too late to get this done, and the Assembly's rapid action demonstrates that. Assemblymember Todd Kaminsky.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. I'm very proud to be here today to be part of a continued push to increase the confidence of New Yorkers in their government by improving our ethical standards for New York's public officials. This package of legislation has many common sense goals for which the time has come. And I commend the Attorney General, for that matter Speaker Hasty, for taking the lead on this pressing issue for New Yorkers who are rightly concerned that more must be done to prevent corruption in our great state. And I just want to say it's very refreshing. The Attorney General, what he didn't say, and what I hear too often in Albany is bad people are going to do bad things. What are you going to do? Throwing their hands up in just despair that nothing can be done. And we're here to say today that we don't believe that. And while, of course, bad people are going to do bad things, it is no doubt my experience as a state and federal prosecutor and now someone working in Albany that real restrictions in place will keep people in their lanes from going outside those lanes and for doing the wrong thing. I really, truly believe that. And it's tremendously refreshing to hear someone who truly believes of the power of reform. This spring, the Assembly took an important first step for reform by drafting and pushing through new laws to address some gaps in our ethics laws. And that effort has brought us to this next step. There is now serious work to do with these advocates of reform here today, the legislature, our Attorney General, and others, to enact lasting and meaningful reforms. The people here today are committed to addressing the urgency felt by New Yorkers in order to restore their trust in government. Today, we commit to work diligently in our respective roles to accomplish this essential and vital task. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And now a terrific activist, someone who has been fighting for reform and fighting for good government for quite a few years, and is a great organizer here on Long Island, a terrific ally of mine and of all who work for the cause of justice, Lisa Tyson of the Long Island Progressive Coalition.
Thank you. We are here today because what is happening in state government right now is a crisis for all New Yorkers and everyone on Long Island especially. It's a crisis not because elected officials are being indicted, but because the criminal charges reveal that our democracy is broken. The massive spending by wealthy special interests drowns out the voices of homeowners and tenants, workers and small businesses, students and seniors. The corruption, both legal and illegal, has damaged not just the public's trust, but also the public's pocketbook. This costs all of us money every day. At the heart of these scandals is a government that responds to billionaires, not ordinary New Yorkers. Whether it's tax breaks for real estate or other wealthy corporations, or privatization of education and public services, or weakening the rent laws and environmental regulation, or refusal to pass a desperately needed increase in the minimum wage, we have a government that is being bought by the wealthiest New Yorkers for their own benefit. And most of the time, they do it without breaking the law. When the billionaires, realtors, hedge fund managers, and CEOs buy huge tax breaks or block legislation that helps working families, we all pay the price. New Yorkers can no longer afford a state government that is selling public policy decisions to the highest bidder. The only answer is for New York voters to own their own government. That's why we need a small donor matching system so candidates can run for office and win with only small donations and the public match. We applaud Attorney General Schneiderman's far-reaching proposals for campaign finance reforms, including publicly matched funds. Incremental change is not acceptable right now. We need major change, and that's what his proposal does. By providing an alternative to pay-to-play politics, Attorney General Eric Schneiderman's plan will restore control of state government to voters instead of donors. And then that will mean state laws that benefits the majority of New Yorkers instead of the 1% of the 1%. Thank you, Attorney General Schneiderman, for providing the kind of statewide leadership New York State needs.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. And now our closer. There could not be anyone more appropriate to bring this to a conclusion than someone who is really one of the great reform leaders in the state of New York, and someone whose work has enabled all of us to do what we do in fighting for reform, the head of Common Cause of New York, Susan Lerner.
Thank you, Attorney General, and thank you, Assemblymember Kaminsky, for stepping up when other leaders have been ducking and taking on our crisis of corruption head on with an important and very broad bill. I was up in Albany yesterday. We delivered more than 2,000 petition signatures to the Senate leaders to just take care of one of the problems that this bill addresses, closing the LLC loophole. Everyday New Yorkers understand there's a crisis of corruption. They've been waiting for this kind of broad reform. So at Common Cause, we are very excited to be standing here today and to support the Attorney General's effort to help Assemblymember Kaminsky see this bill move forward. And we're here in Long Island to say to the Long Island leaders of the state Senate, this is not a Democratic or a Republican problem. I think the events of this year have shown that corruption is nonpartisan, unfortunately, in our state. It's got to be addressed, and we're all waiting to see the Senate step forward and join hands with the Assembly and the Attorney General and address this problem in a meaningful, broad way once and for all. So to listeners, pick up the phone, call your state senator, say this corruption cannot continue. When are you going to get behind the Attorney General's bill? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Susan. And we will take some questions, but I just want to make one final point. Some people have said there's not time enough to act. And those of us who have been through an end of session in Albany know that 3 weeks is a lifetime. Bills have not yet been written that will come to life, die, come back, die again, and come back again. So there is plenty of time to do this. We have provided information about the proposals we've made, other states in which they've been used, New York City as a model for some of them. There are very few things in here that were not introduced before by somebody and have been considered. The legislature and the governor have all the time they need to pass comprehensive reform legislation and put an end to this cycle of prosecution and further erosion of public confidence. All we lack is the political will. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we will take some questions.
This is for the acting district attorney, Mr. Robert Brodsky. Can you confirm yesterday's report? Why don't we start on the bill? Any questions on the bill?
I suppose you could say it's on topic, but go ahead. And I already know the answer, so yes.
I'd like to see if the acting district attorney can confirm yesterday's report that her office is investigating Senator Saul Marcelino for campaign finance dollars.
Mr. Attorney?
Thank you. I'm not going to comment on any specific reports, but I will say that the mileage system is porous and it is prone to abuse. I've asked my Public Corruption Bureau to look at all the state legislators in Nassau County to identify any issues or potential investigations. And that's why this bill is important. We'll come full circle now. That's why this bill will fix this broken system. Thank you.
Ms. Stiggis, do you have a problem with somebody in your office leaking a report like that to the Channel 4 last night? Is there a problem in your office with leaks coming out of your office?
I don't believe there's a problem.
So, can you confirm that this investigation is true? It's already been in the media.
I think she just answered that question.
I don't think so. Actually, I mean, we're asking whether or not she can confirm whether or not her office leaked information regarding this investigation. We're trying to be able to confirm whether or not this information is true.
All right. So just to be clear, I will not comment on any ongoing investigation or the existing of an ongoing investigation in my office. I believe the district attorney has the same policy, and you can ask the question, but the answer is going to be the same.
Again, we do not comment on ongoing investigations. This isn't a U-turn. We don't comment on investigations. Thank you.
Please, there are times when something is so far out in the public and it's been an ongoing investigation that people have seen. When people saw people with jackets that said New York State Attorney General carrying boxes out of engineers' offices, they sort of suspected we were looking at some issues related to abuses of Sandy victims. So there are times when you acknowledge there's an investigation, but in most cases it's a no comment. The governor has been very, very vocal about his desire for reform. He has supported some of the provisions of this bill and other things that are similar to it, so we look forward to getting his support. Not since Wednesday. He's been involved with the city mayor, I think.
Anything else on this or any other comments?
Again, I'm not going to comment on the details of this investigation. I'm not confirming anything. I'm not commenting on it. I'm not commenting on specific reports or specific investigations out of my office.
Okay, thank you all very much.